All right, let's move on to Afghanistan, where the humanitarian situation continues to be a disaster. The UN is screaming about it, saying we got to do something. They're trying to put together like a $5 billion, the largest fund ever, to help the people of Afghanistan make it through this winter. They're continuing to say that it's going to be millions of Afghans who, are at risk for starvation this winter. And of course, when we're talking about millions of people at risk for starving, we're talking about, the youngest or the oldest, the absolutely most vulnerable, the children under 5 or so, who are really at risk of dropping dead in mass numbers in Afghanistan this winter. And so that's the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan right now, as the Taliban are trying to get some talks to happen. Previously, they had proposed a prisoner swap with the United States. And, while the Taliban may be asking for somebody who isn't a great character, the U.S. war in Afghanistan is over. And so one of the ways to really start to put this war behind us is to make sure all the American captives are out of Afghanistan. And if the U.S. could swap some Afghan prisoners for them, that seems like, kind of what should happen at the end of a war. And so, it's part of this complicated thing where the U.S. has all along not treated this as an actual war, and has, kind of tried to claim that, these are people who are criminals, but they actually don't apply them to the criminal code and everything like that. Although I believe the person that the Taliban are asking for here is actually in the U.S. prison system. But, same time, this is a war, and so at the end of war, you release the POWs, and this could be a way to bring about a resolution for the war. Now, there are talks going on between the Taliban and Western governments right now in Oslo. These are the first direct talks between the U.S. and the Taliban and Western governments since the fall of Kabul and the Taliban taking over that country. The U.S. is represented here by Tom West, who replaced Ahmed Khalilzad as the U.S. envoy to Afghanistan. And I mean, as far as I could tell at this point, it doesn't seem like there's been any announcement of success coming from these talks. They're going to continue for 3 days. They started on Sunday, so they'll go through Tuesday of this week. The Taliban are continuing to look for access to the Afghan government accounts and, relieving of sanctions and all of that, which the U.S. so far seems unwilling to offer. There's another diplomatic issue that the Taliban are having, and that is what to do with all the Afghan government embassies around the world. And now the Taliban are trying to insert their officials into some of these embassies. It says that there's 65 Afghan government missions around the world. Most of them continue to be run by the officials of the now defunct Afghan government. And so they're actually keeping the Taliban from assuming these posts. And while I guess, some people might not want Taliban envoys in their countries and things like that, and that could maybe on some level be understandable, I would guess it'd be a good thing for potential diplomacy and negotiations with the Taliban to make sure that these are happening, that the at least some of the embassies are staffed by the Taliban. Even North Korea maintains embassies in I think Sweden has an embassy in North Korea, and these are ways for the US to even relay messages to the Korean government. So the Taliban setting up some embassies and taking over some of these posts may not be a bad thing, even though, again, not that the Taliban are great people or anything like that. The U.S. did promise some aid to Afghanistan, $308 million, nowhere to what's absolutely needed for the Afghan people, but it is a token amount of something, and they're going to give them some COVID vaccines. Unfortunately, what the Afghan people really need is for the U.S. to unfreeze the funds, and that's exactly what we're hearing from the UN as well, saying that this is what is needed to prevent the Afghans who are facing starvation from starving to death. And again, as I talked about on a recent show with Henry Hankerson, who is great military vet and everything like that. Talking about how even though Biden withdrew from Afghanistan, that the situation that we now have in Afghanistan could kill more people than the war did. Just absolutely insane. A couple things going on the ground in Afghanistan. I believe I mentioned this on the show a couple times, but more in relation to other things. And just wanted to make sure I nailed it down on an Afghan segment. As a senior member of the Pakistani Taliban was assassinated in Afghanistan. I believe the assassination happened in the Nangarhar province, which is where ISIS-K operates most freely in Afghanistan. At least as far as my knowledge, that's still the case, even though the Taliban have taken over the country now from the U.S. government. That's still mostly where the ISIS-K hangs out, and ISIS-K is former members of the Pakistani Taliban, the Taliban. And so I guess, maybe there's some kind of factional feud going on that I don't understand. Maybe this is an example of like the Trinky Taliban or ISIS-K seeing this guy as a potential problem or something like that, and it being just an assassination of one of their own members. Or hell, it could be the Taliban who carried out the assassination in an effort to appease the Pakistani government, which is currently at war with the TET after they broke their ceasefire with the Pakistani government in the past month or so. There's also been some fighting in Afghanistan. 4 people killed in fighting between the Taliban and the Uzbeks. This is an ethnic minority group in the north of the country. And this happened in the middle of January, so about 10 days ago. And I haven't read about continued fighting or, more people trying to rally to the Uzbek cause. And so hopefully this is a sign of a growing sectarian war or anything in Afghanistan was just more of a one-off thing between like maybe a small militia faction, the Taliban or something like that. The Islamic State continues to carry out attacks in Afghanistan. The latest one was in Herat, and 6 people died when the ISIS-K, ISKP put a bomb on a minibus. So that's the news I have on Afghanistan. Of course, again, the biggest thing that needs to happen is for the U.S. to unfreeze those accounts and allow the Taliban to operate as a government that can import things for its citizens and feed the people who are completely deprived when the U.S. popped the massive aid bubble that it had set up in Afghanistan.